Senate will come to order. Senators will be in their seats. Clerk will call the roll.
Alley. Baumgardner. Bellinger. Bowers. Clays. Corson. Dietrich. Dahl. Erickson. Fagg. Falscadeau. Francisco. Gossage. Haley. Hawk. Hildebrand. Holland. Holscher. Kirshen. Cluse. Longbine. Masterson. McGinn. Olson. O'Shea. Peck. Peterson. Petty. Pittman. Pyle. Reichman. Steffen. Straub. Sullentrop. Sykes. Thompson. Tyson. Ware. Warren. Wilborn.
Senators and your guests, please rise and give prayerful attention to the chaplain.
Please join me in prayer. Spirit of the living God, you prompted your messenger, John, in 3 John chapter 1, verses 1 through 4, to communicate both the compassion of love and the firmness of truth. And Lord, we thank you for faithfully guiding us with the firmness of your truth and protecting us with the compassion of your love. Thank you for the balance of both. You hold us to the codes necessary to regulate our behavior, the regulations needed for successful living, but you balance the restraining discipline of your laws with the liberating power of your love. For in Proverbs chapter 13, verse 24, you show that the compassion of love and the restraint of discipline are both needed. So help us to be like you. For law or policy without love is just empty regulation, while love or empathy without law is just weak flexibility. Help each one of us here to be an example, a model of both your law and your love. Help us pour into others that balance that you pour into us. I come to you in the name of him who disciplines us, yet loves us to death. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This time I'm withdrawing SB 286 from taxation and referring to the Committee on Judiciary. Messages from the governor. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill number 13 has been signed, approved March 26, 2021. Respectfully, Laura Kelly, Governor.
Messages from the House. Clerk will read.
The House concurs in Senate amendments to HB 2072. The House adopts the Conference Committee report on HB 2022. The House non-concurs in Senate amendments to HB 2104 and requests a conference and has appointed Representatives Adams, Smith, Mason, and Gartner as conferees on part of the House. The House accedes to the request of the Senate for a conference on SB 58 and has appointed Representatives Patton, Ralph, and Carmichael as conferees on part of the House. The House accedes to the request of the Senate for a conference on Senate Bill 103 and has appointed Representatives Patton, Ralph, and Carmichael as conferees on part of the House. The House accedes to the request of the Senate for a conference on SB 107 and has appointed Representatives Patton, Ralph, and Carmichael as conferees on part of the House. The House accedes to the request of the Senate for a conference on SB 175 and has appointed Representatives Landwehr, Epley, and Parker as conferees on part of the House. The House accedes to the request of the Senate for a conference on sub-SB 238 and has appointed Representatives Landwehr, Epic, and Parker as conferees on part of the House. Announcing passage of HB 2176. HB 2176, an act concerning cities.
This constitutes introduction to those bills previously read. Motions to concur. Chair recognizes Senator from Johnson, Senator Olson on SB 65. Please make your motion and then explain.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate concur in the House amendments to Senate Bill 65.
You may explain.
Thank you, Mr. President. 65 passed out of here 38-0. That's the kit incur. They added Senate Bill 91, which passed out of here 34-5, and that's the HPIP. That's the only thing they did was put them two bills together, and I'm going to concur on that, so I'll stand for questions.
Are there questions on the motion? Senator from Douglas, Senator Holland.
Thank you, Mr. President. I strongly encourage the body to support the concur on Senate Bill 65. It's a great program. Thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, we will now hold for final action. Again, on Senate Bill 66, Senator from Johnson, Senator Olson, on motion to concur.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move when the Senate concur in the House amendments to Senate Bill 66.
Please explain.
Thank you, Mr. President. There was only one amendment that was put on. Representative Toplicker put on an amendment that would increase tax credit for people with disabilities. It would move it from $9,000 to $15,000. This hasn't been done in 20 years, so bring it a little more in line with what the cost is for people having to stay with disabilities, being able to stay home. It allows them to become a little more ADA compliant. I'll stand for questions.
Question or comment on a motion to concur on 66? Chair recognizes Senator from Douglas, Senator Holland.
Thank you, Mr. President. I strongly encourage the body once again to vote on the concur for Senate Bill 66. We very much need the angel investor tax credits. I do support the House amendments on the disability portion. Thank you.
Any further questions or comments on the motion on 66? Seeing none, we will hold for final action. On a motion to concur on SB 90, Chair recognizes again Senator from Johnson, Senator Olson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move when the Senate concur in the House amendments to Senate Bill 90.
Please explain.
Thank you, Mr. President. There was only one tweak they made. They took the population of the county from 60,000 to 80,000. It seemed reasonable, so I'm concurring with that. That's the only change. It passed out of here 33-6, passed the House 105-17.
Question or comments? Senator from Douglas, Senator Holland.
Thank you, Mr. President. I, too, would ask the body to concur favorably on Senate Bill 90. You will recall also the Senate, I believe, on the floor, it was on the floor in the committee, made the amendment basically to remove the limitation on the counties that came to the cities. So basically now, Mr. President, any city, I believe under 60,000, can actually apply for and work these programs for the rural housing incentive district, which I think is very valuable to all our small communities. Encourage the body's support. Thank you.
Any further question or comments from Senator from Johnson on the motion on SB 90? Seeing none, you've heard the motion. We'll hold for final action. We are now ready for final action. On this roll call, we will take the following: the motions to concur on SB 65, SB 66, and SB 90, and the following consent calendar bills on page 3 and 4: HB 2050, HB 2162, HB 2214, and HB 2367. Clerk will read the titles.
Senate Bill 65, an act concerning economic development. Senate Bill 66, an act concerning income taxation. Senate Bill 90, an act concerning the Kansas Rural Housing Incentive District Act. House Bill 2050, an act concerning the Legislative Division of Post-Audit. House Bill 2162, an act concerning census data. House Bill 2214, an act concerning state property. House Bill 2367, an act concerning the State Corporation Commission.
Clerk will call the roll.
Alley. Baumgardner. Billinger. Bowers. Clays. Corson. Dietrich. Dahl. Erickson. Bag. Faust-Godot. Francisco. Gossage. Haley. Hawk. Hildebrand. Holland. Holscher. Kirshen. Cluse. Longbine. Masterson. McGinn. Olson. O'Shea. Peck. Peterson. Petty. Pittman. Pyle. Reichman. Steffen. Straub. Sullentrop. Sykes. Thompson. Tyson. Ware. Warren. Wilborn.
Has every senator had an opportunity to vote? Does any senator wish to explain their vote? Senator from Lynn, Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to explain my vote on House Bill 2162. This is too important of an issue just to put on the consent calendar. We have a president of the United States who has delayed the U.S. Census information until September of this year. That does not promote trust. That does not promote the integrity that we need to have faith in the data that is going to be presented before us, and therefore I vote no in opposition of 2162.
Would you like your remarks read on the journal? So ordered. Further explanation, Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. President. House Bill 2162 makes changes to our statutes after the constitutional amendment to change the requirement for a census in Kansas to recount military and students. So it makes sense that we have our statutes follow the will of the people. I vote aye on HB 2162.
Would you like your remarks spread on the journal?
I would.
So ordered. Further explanation. Senator from Miami, Senator Baumgardner.
Mr. President, I'd like to change my vote on Senate Bill 66 from aye to no.
So ordered. Further explanation? Are there any changes? Any senator wish to change their vote? Further changes? Seeing none, clerk will close the roll and tally the vote. $38 having voted in favor and 1 against the passage of SB 65, 29 having voted in favor and 9 against SB 66, 34 having voted in favor and 5 against SB 90, 39 having voted in favor and none against House Bill 2050, 38 in favor, 1 against House Bill 2162, 38 in favor, 1 against House Bill 2214, and 39 in favor and none against House Bill 2367. These measures, having reached their constitutional majority, are hereby declared passed. On a motion to accede, Chair recognizes Senator from Lynn, Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate accede to the request of the House for a conference committee on House Bill 2104.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion's adopted. As conferees on the part of the Senate, Chair appoints Senator from Lynn, Senator Tyson, Senator from Cali, Senator Alley, Senator from Douglas, Senator Holland. Chair recognizes the leader from Cali, Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate resolve itself in the committee of a whole for consideration of bills on the calendar under the heading of general orders.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Chair appoints the Senator from Cherokee, Senator Hildebrand, to preside over the committee of the whole.
The Senate having resolved itself into the committee of the whole, we will now consider those items listed on the calendar under the heading of general orders. We will now turn our attention to HCR 5015. The chair recognizes the senator from Saline, Senator Clays, to explain the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This resolution, HCR 5015, lists 17 reasons that Congress should reject HR 1 and S1 before the United States Senate and House of Representatives. These acts relate to changing election and campaign finance laws to the benefit of cheaters and corrupt politicians. HR 1 and S1 would be an unprecedented federal takeover of state-run elections, ignoring that what works for California and New Jersey may not indeed work for Kansas. HR 1 and S1 benefit corrupt politicians by allowing for taxpayer funds to be used for salaries for candidates. HR 1 and S1 make it easier to cheat in elections by eliminating voter identification and signature witnesses, eroding confidence in our elections, and ultimately reducing voter turnout. HR 1 and S1 contain unconstitutional provisions that make it a crime for trade associations to exercise their First Amendment rights to free speech, not just by opposing a candidate, but by merely having the gall to mention their position on bills. For these reasons, among those listed in HCR 5015, the Kansas Legislature should urge Congress to reject HR 1 and S1 by passing HCR 5015. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I will stand for questions on HCR 5015.
Are there questions from the senator from Saline, Senator Clays? Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a few questions for the senator from Saline, if he will stand for them.
He is standing.
Thank you. I understand that there is some concern with this House concurrent resolution, but in reading the resolution, I really it didn't help me understand anything specifically that we are concerned about. And I think if we're asking Congress to make changes, we would need to be more specific. So if we look at the resolution on line 10, can the senator from Saline give me some examples of unfunded, burdensome and unconstitutional mandates on the states?
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays.
Appreciate the question. Just to go back to the intent of the resolution for a moment, the resolution does not contemplate offering any changes, as was noted. It simply asks for the Congress to oppose the act. Going to unfunded, burdensome, and unconstitutional mandates, if you'll give me a moment, I will obtain my list. Oh, here it is. A lot of papers here, Mr. Chairman. You'll have to give me a moment. Mr. Chairman, some of the burdens include pre-clearance. This is an item that was actually overturned by the Supreme Court. It requires states to get permission from the federal government for changes as small as modifying the hours in an election office, moving a voting location from a school gym to a library. Some of these smaller items require that the state would go through a process that is bureaucratic and unnecessary in order to make some of these minor changes. Essentially, there are just several burdens that are placed upon the state to comply with a federal mandate as opposed to allowing the state to make those determinations. It also mandates things like allowing all felons to vote rather than maintaining our 14th Amendment rights as a state to dictate whether or not those individuals have met criteria to have those rights restored. It forces states to extend periods of early voting. It mandates same-day voter registration. It limits the ability of states to cooperate to see who is registered in multiple states at the same time. I could go on, but those are just some examples for the senator.
Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you. I appreciate those examples. I do know that one of the things it does, I believe, is require a week's notice to voters if the polling place is being changed. To me, that doesn't seem burdensome. The senator from Saline referred to voting rights being given to individuals who may have committed a felony but are now in good standing. That does not seem to be burdensome to provide citizens with the right to vote. So it also talks about preventing necessary action by states regarding registration or voting that impedes free speech and lawful election activities. What are some of those lawful election activities that are being prevented?
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays.
Sure, some of the lawful election activities would include perhaps notifying a elections board official of something that is found to be suspect in the voting process. It it fully restricts some of that speech. In fact, the ACLU mentions that they object to the inclusion of electioneering communications in the definition of campaign-related expenditures, other items such as that. There are multiple items in here that would relate to the answer for the good senator. But I would just stick with that item that there are some communications that would then be made unlawful during the election and campaign process.
Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe either lawful or unlawful refers to the law. And if this were passed, then the things that it allows would be lawful, and things that have been prevented, states being unable to enact some voter suppression techniques would be considered unlawful. So I don't think outside of that law you can discuss whether it's lawful or unlawful. It also talks, this is about on lines 24 and 25, about reducing public accountability of elected officials. How would those elected officials' accountability be reduced?
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Elected officials would be able to take money out of their campaign account to live on. These officials would have the capability to use taxpayer match. There's a 600% taxpayer match that's available in here. Those funds could then be used to fund anything that the individual candidate wanted to spend those dollars on, which could include things like braces for their kid, or just about anything through a salary that they could receive through running for office as a candidate.
Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. But wouldn't they still have to report all their expenditures, and isn't that what is providing the public accountability?
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays.
Well, that's not accurate. Once it's received as a salary, then the itemization is no longer eligible for that salary.
Senator from Douglas
would be the salary.
Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it may also be true that running for office requires a considerable amount of time, especially if it's for Congress. I know that there were discussions about whether individuals should be able to pay for childcare so that they would have the ability to run. So if there's a limit to that salary, then yes, they would have the ability to spend it as they saw fit. It talks about, it forces states to implement automatic voter registration, same-day registration, and online voter registration. These processes are very important to letting individuals be registered to vote. What would our objections be to having a standard set of requirements for voter registration? This is on lines 32 and 33.
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. States would be required to immediately register a person to vote upon request, even the day of the election, with no buffer period to verify personal information. This provision then enables someone to vote without ever verifying that they're an eligible voter.
Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My understanding was that same-day registration still can be done with the rules that we have for provisional ballots, so that although someone could register that day, there's still the opportunity to review their information to find out if they are qualified to vote, just as we do with any individual who's casting a provisional ballot. So I think the good senator may not understand that those opportunities are still available. So I am very pleased that we are, as a nation, following up on what we've done in the past. Congress passed the Voting Rights Act in 1965. They reformed campaign finance laws and the Federal Election Campaign Act. They worked together to provide the Help America Vote Act so that we can register to vote when we're getting our driver's license. All these measures were taken at the federal level, were appropriate, and helped extend voting rights. I am very much concerned that this resolution talks in broad language so that if you read it, you wouldn't really understand what's being allowed. There may be issues that we need to address, but overall, I'm in favor of the HR 1 and S1 and believe that if we have questions of Congress, we should be much more specific about our concerns. Thank you.
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays, would you like to respond?
Not at this time, thank you.
Senator from Barton, Senator Straub.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to speak in support of House Concurrent Resolution 5015 in opposition of HR 1 and S1. Having served as a county commissioner and as a result also on the board of county canvassers, I can appreciate that Kansas has a very good election policy. We cannot allow some of the things in HR and S1 to be put into law because it puts at jeopardy our very government. On this, I believe that it would require them to register voters the very same day as the election. I wouldn't know this, but those of you that have received the COVID vaccine, I assume that you had to show your ID when receiving that vaccine. Some of the things in this would not require people to show voter ID to vote in our elections. That is a problem. There are many other things that are troublesome in HR 1 and S1, so I fully support HCR 5015 and oppose this very dangerous legislation at our federal level. Thank you.
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays, would you like to respond?
Not at this time, thank you.
Chair recognizes the senator from Johnson, Senator Holscher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In looking over some components of HR 1, it seems like there's some interesting provisions in regard to election integrity, election security, and campaign finance. In light of that, I do have a few questions for the carrier of the bill, if he will stand for a couple.
He's standing.
First off, does the carrier oppose federal lobbyists being prohibited from working for foreign entities as covered in HR 1?
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The resolution deals with multiple items that are objected to inside HR 1 and S1. It does not contemplate that there may be provisions in there that are acceptable. In fact, the idea behind it matches up with the ACLU's objection to HR 1 and S1, where the ACLU has very specific items that they are opposed to while they are in favor of others. So I would just answer by saying that while there may be things that some folks in this room may be in favor of in HR 1 and S1, that they should be dealt with as separate bills, and HR 1 and S1 contain enough provisions that are objectionable that they should be voted down, similar to the ACLU's position.
Okay, so it sounds
Senator from Johnson, Senator Holscher.
So it sounds like there likely are provisions in here that could be very pertinent to Kansas and potentially maybe be good for us. In light of that, I have another question. Does the carrier pose the requirement that all voting machines in federal elections be manufactured in the United States?
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays.
My answer will be the same on all of these items not covered under HCR 5015. The items that are objectionable are listed in HCR 5015. For those reasons alone, HR 1 and S1 should be voted down by the U.S. Congress. It is in line with the ACLU's opposition to this bill. They have decided that the entire bill must be voted down, though they only oppose certain provisions in it. And this resolution is no different in that it is pretty clear about the items that it finds objectionable in the bills and that they should be voted down based on that criteria.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Holscher.
Well, based upon that, then we would potentially have a lot of legislation that never goes anywhere, because we can have any given bill that has certain components that a person may really, really like, and a few components they may not. And I guess it goes to that phrase of you don't throw out the baby with the bathwater sometimes. But there are other things in here too, in regard to not utilizing taxpayer dollars to settle a member of Congress's sexual harassment or discrimination lawsuits. There are so many things in here too, as far as modernizing our elections. And it appears to me that overall, what is in HR 1 does a lot to fight voter suppression. And it strikes me as odd that we would be going against that. And I guess my final question is, does the carrier or anyone in this body serve as a member of the U.S. Congress? And do we as a legislature have the ability to pass laws that govern states other than Kansas? Because it strikes me that this is out of our lane.
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill has an outsized impact on federalism, and it impacts the elections run at the state and local level in the state of Kansas, and therefore is very much a concern of agencies and the Kansas legislature. We are asking for the U.S. Congress to act to prevent this encroachment on federalism and the state-run and locally run elections in our state.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Holscher.
Thank you so much. I will be voting against this measure because I do very much support the efforts in HC1 that works to fight voter suppression, modernize our elections, and ensure we have secure elections moving forward. Thank you.
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays, would you like to respond?
Not at this time, thank you.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Thompson.
Thank you, Mr.
Senator Foscato, I know that you were standing, but in debate, I'm trying to keep it even, going back and forth. So that's why the chair recognized the senator from Johnson. Try to get two sides going back and forth.
Mr. Chairman, I was standing first for a long while before the Senator Thompson stood.
I understand that.
If we
but
want to
the
be
chair
fair.
recognized the senator from Johnson to keep the debate going back and forth instead of having one side dominate the debate. So at this time, the chair recognizes the senator from Johnson, Senator Thompson, then Senator from Sedgwick. Senator Foscato, you're up next, okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I fully support this resolution. H.R. 1 is an overstep of federal authority. The states have the authority to make the rules about their own elections. This takes that away. This changes the fundamental makeup of our Constitution as it was intended. It steals our authority as states, and it's all sorts of overreach. I could stand here and talk about it all day, but bottom line, this is not necessary. Our resolution is necessary to send the message to Congress that they need to stay in their lane and allow the states to do their job, which is take care of the elections. We saw all sorts of election fraud in other states. We have a pretty doggone good state election laws and rules here in this state. Do we need to firm them up? Probably so. And there's some things we can do to do so. But to throw that out and let the federal government tell us what to do and how to run our election laws is egregious. We have to send a message as a state, and it's time to stand up and do so through this resolution. I fully support HCR 5015. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays, would you like to respond?
No response at this time, Mr. Chairman. I believe the next individual up is conferring.
The chair recognizes the good senator from Sedgwick, Senator Foscato.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If the gentleman from Saline would answer a couple of questions I have, and then a comment, Mr. Chairman. So this legislation that we are dealing with today, House CR 5015, it's quite troubling to me, Mr. Chairman, to be quite honest. My mother fought in the 60s for the right to vote, and I'm standing here today for individuals to be able to exercise their American right to vote, Mr. Chairman. I believe this legislation is voter suppression. For decades, there has been a concentrated effort to disenfranchise Americans, especially people of color. And I'm just going to say it like it is. You know, back in the 60s, it was colored, then black, and now African Americans. Mr. Chairman, I call myself a Kansan, a Wichitan, actually. But this resolution, HCR 5015, Mr. Chairman, it says urging the United States Congress to reject the For the People Act in 2021. Mr. Chairman, this year, Mr. Chairman, there has been 253 bills introduced in 43 state houses all across the country to restrict voter access, including Kansas. Mr. Chairman, in recent years, Kansas has seen its fair share of attempts to suppress the vote. As you and I both, Mr. Chairman, here in our Fenton State Committee, we've dealt with legislation just last week to make it harder for disabled and elderly Kansans to vote by mail. I represent a lot of poor people. They still don't have cars. They still take the bus. I give people with disabilities rights to vote. We've made it in the legislation just here in this beautiful state capital. We have had legislation to disenfranchise thousands of Kansas of their right to vote by stopping of the counting of ballots after 7 p.m. on election day, election night, rather, Mr. Chairman, even though many Kansans have cast ballots and mailed in the appropriate time on election day. Mr. Chairman, if you recall, he's a friend of mine too, actually, all of us in this body, actually. Our former Secretary of State, Kobach, spent his 8 years in office trying to make it harder for people to vote. Mr. Chairman, he actually, our former Secretary of State, left us with a $3.3 million bill after that lawsuit. And I'll say this, and this is just from my heart and from my experience of many people in my family. Mr. Chairman, my mother had 10 sisters, total of 11 in the family. My grandparents stayed together until they died. Mr. Vice Chair, as a matter of fact, my mother and all of her 10 sisters are now deceased. Mr. Chairman, all of them my mother actually marched with Dr. Martin Luther King, the March on Washington, the Poor People's March, fighting for the right to vote. I mean, I actually know people who died fighting for the right to vote. This has taken us backwards. This has taken us way back. I would not be standing here today as the first African-American woman without individuals being able to cast their vote fairly. And I'll say this, I get it. I get it, Mr. Chairman. I get it. Just like colored people in the 60s fought for the right to vote, to be represented. You know, you've heard of no representation without presentation. We've heard that. So I get it. A lot of people think some of the elections nationwide have been unfair. And I ran for office for equal rights and fairness for all. But Mr. Chairman, I would say that this legislation here, it's taken us back. So Mr. Chairman, my question as I stood initially for the gentleman from Saline is he, Mr. Chairman, actually asking that the Congress go back on legislation they passed?
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is asking for H.R. 1 and S1 to be voted against, so it would not be a change in the way that elections are conducted should H.R. 1 and S1 be rejected by the Congress.
Senator from Sedgwick, Senator Foscato.
Mr. Chairman, I still think it's going back on what Congress has done makes it harder for us to be fair and equal within democracy, making sure that everyone has a right to cast their vote. Just like here, Mr. Chairman, when we vote here on the Senate floor, there's always a call to say, has every senator had a chance, an opportunity, the right to vote? Thereby, I stand in opposition of the resolution. And Mr. Chairman, with that, I'll yield to the senator from Johnson, Senator Dinah Sykes.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Sykes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of questions. Has this already passed or been voted on in the U.S. House of Representatives?
Senator Foscato, if you yielded your time and you sat down, are you vacating your spot?
Mr. Chairman, just for clarification, I had a lot more to say, but initially when I stood earlier, I was yielding my time to the senator from Johnson, Senator Dinah Sykes.
Okay, Senator, if you vacate your spot, you lose the opportunity to yield.
Well, I'll keep standing then, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator from Johnson, Senator Sykes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of questions for the carrier of the bill. Has the U.S. House of Representatives already voted on this legislation?
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. H.R. 1 was voted upon by the United States House of Representatives. It is scheduled in the Senate during the month of April.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Sykes.
Then why are we forwarding this to the House congressional leadership and to our 4 members of Congress if they've already voted? I also noticed that there's not a fiscal note. Just curious what this is going to cost the taxpayers of Kansas to send this to our delegation and all members of the House, U.S. House of Representatives.
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe that this concurrent resolution was introduced prior to the vote being taken in the House. the United States House of Representatives, and therefore it does not contemplate that it's already been passed by one chamber. As far as the fiscal note, I don't have one. I don't know if one was requested, so I do not have access to that.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Sykes.
Do you not think it would be wise to have offered an amendment so that we would not be wasting taxpayers' dollars?
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This was referred to the Committee of the Whole.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Sykes.
I believe as the carrier of the bill, you absolutely could have had an amendment to fix that section, but I will go on to other questions. Why are we wasting our time voting on a non-binding, pointless, fruitless, and partisan resolution when we could be focusing on actual issues facing Kansans?
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd move that when the committee rises and report, it reports HCR 5015 favorably for adoption.
Point of order.
Point of order has been called. Senator from Johnson, Senator Sykes.
Is he trying to call the question? We're in the middle of debate.
The chair has not recognized a motion, so we are still on debate.
Okay, then I would like an answer to my question, and I will re-ask it. If the Congress has already, and we are going to waste money to send letters and postage to all members of the U.S. House of Representatives who have already voted on this, then why are we wasting our time voting on a non-binding, pointless, fruitless, and partisan resolution when we could be focusing on actual issues facing Kansans?
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to be absolutely clear about who is wasting whose time. I'm happy to have a vote on this resolution right now, immediately, if that's what the questioner would like to see happen.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Sykes.
I would actually like to have discussions about Medicaid expansion, economic development, encouraging legislation for Kansans to stay in Kansas, also known as the brain drain, maybe helping our schools and businesses respond to the COVID crisis. But since this was so important and we're talking about it, I do have questions, because if we are telling our Congress that we do not support this, I think we should figure out what is actually in this, because there are a lot of pieces of this that are doing reforms, modernizing voting registration. So does the carrier oppose making Election Day a federal holiday?
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The resolution does not have anything in it regarding the making of the Election Day a holiday.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Sykes.
Thank you, but the resolution is saying that we want you to oppose this, although you've already voted on it. But does the carrier believe that promoting, disseminating false and misleading information about elections?
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The statement inside the bill that discusses the disseminating of, quote, false and misleading information is so vague that it could actually interfere with free speech and other legitimate activities. It is the vagueness of that particular portion of the bill that is objectionable and could pull in some legitimate activities that aren't associated with necessarily something that's nefarious, and that's why it's objected to in this resolution.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Sykes.
Thank you. I do believe that H.R. 1 or S1 criminalizes knowing and intentional communication of false and misleading information, including about the time, place, or manner of elections, public endorsements, and the rules governing our voter eligibility and voter registration, made with the intent of preventing eligible voters from casting ballots. So does the carrier oppose 16 and 17-year-olds being allowed to pre-register to vote?
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I do object to having 16-year-olds registering to vote with the other provisions of this bill that also make it easier to vote or possible to vote without ever proving identification. A 16-year-old being registered to vote is then capable of simply signing that they are eligible to vote as opposed to proving so with an identification.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Sykes.
I'm not sure that's quite accurate, but H.R. 1 does allow 16 and 17-year-olds to pre-register, as does the state of Kansas allows 17-year-olds to pre-register so that they can vote as soon as they turn 18. I currently have a son who is 18, and actually he turned 18 on October 28th, and until October 28th, every time we looked to see if he was a registered voter, it did not refresh until actually on his birthday on October 28th. So he could not vote early, but he was pre-registered, which made it a lot easier for him to be engaged and be able to vote on Election Day. So does the carrier oppose strengthening voting across the overseas military members?
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays.
The resolution does not speak to registering overseas and military voters being objectionable.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Sykes.
But it does specify that service members must be sent their mail ballots 45 days before an election. I believe the senator from Sedgwick commented on how many states and bills, 250 bills introduced in 43 state houses across the country to restrict voter access, including in Kansas. On last Friday, a bill passed out of Fed and State that we actually fixed 3 years ago on this floor. I actually carried the bill, and it said that mail ballots would be counted if they were postmarked on or before 7 o'clock on Election Day and received by Friday of the Election Day. Are you aware that in Kansas, our mail sometimes gets shipped outside of the state before so that it's processed? I believe actually Topeka goes to Kansas City. So a lot of times it can take over a week for that. So do you think it's important that people have their ballots counted when they sent those in the mail at least a week or at the time of postmark by 7 o'clock on election night?
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't sit on the Federal and State Affairs Committee, so I'm not aware of the bill that she's speaking of. I don't see anything in HCR 5015 that speaks to that bill.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Sykes.
There are a lot of pieces in this that is actually good bipartisan legislation. And the fact that we are condemning this and we are saying we oppose this, I think it is a disgrace, and I think it's showing that we want voter suppression in Kansas. And we can only look to what is happening across the state. The state of Georgia has made the national headlines for its attempts at voter suppression, decreasing the amount of time for voters who request a mail ballot, decrease the amount of time election offices can mail out ballots, prohibit state and local election office from sending out unsolicited advance ballot application, prohibiting the counting of out-of-precinct provisional ballots. Georgia runoff elections will now be 4 weeks instead of 9 weeks. Shortening the time that voters have to register and request ballots, caps the number of ballot box drops a country or a county can have and moves them inside election office that will only be accessible during voting days and hours instead of 24/7 access, prohibits mobile voting buses, which were used as early voting sites in Fulton County, which is the home of Atlanta and also my husband, to make voting more accessible. Perhaps most inhumane and heartless of all is that the law criminalizes the distribution of food and water to voters as they're waiting at line in the polling places. But yet, H.R. 1 addresses some of these issues. But according to the carrier of the bill, we do not want to support this because it's allowing better access to voting. With that, I will yield my time back to the senator from Sedgwick.
Senator from Sedgwick, Senator Foscato, you had yielded to the senator from Johnson. You now have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I will, I think our points have been made, and I don't know, I just want to make it easier for people to vote. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to correct a few things. First, it was said that this bill was bipartisan, or that there's bipartisanship involved in this bill. It passed 220 to 210 on a party line vote. This is very much not a bipartisan piece of legislation in H.R. 1. Wanted to also speak to Georgia, as it was brought up. New Jersey, Virginia, and California require voter ID. Even Joe Biden's Delaware has more restrictive laws than Georgia. I also wanted to speak to some of the basic protections that are in place that have been challenged here. Voter identification was voted for in this body in 2011 with the votes of the current sitting governor and a member of the Democrat caucus. The signature verification is a simple process that certainly doesn't impede anyone from voting. Also, vote harvesting, which has been brought up multiple times without stating that that's what it is. That process removes the chain of custody from the ballot, and that is not a process by which one can have confidence in the outcome of an election when those ballots are not in the possession of those who are supposed to have possession of those ballots in such a way that custody can be traced back. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll continue to stand for questions.
Senator from Reno, Senator Stephan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's very, very important that we do not minimize the importance of this resolution. It's paramount to take a stand for the preservation of fair and safe elections. H.R. 1 is a clear attack on our traditions and our fair elections. This bill stops fraud, or this resolution stops fraud. It stands for voter protection, not suppression. It is states' rights to provide secure elections. That is what HCR 5015 does. What I hear on a daily basis, on the phone, in emails, texts, in person, is this overwhelming concern among my constituents that what we saw transpire in early November will become the wave of the future. H.R. 1 comes along and their fears amplify. They want to know what I can do. Unfortunately, I'm relegated to not much more than promoting a resolution. But this resolution carries wisdom, it carries weight, and it will make a strong statement for fair elections controlled by the states. And I'm grateful to the senator from Saline to stand for this resolution, and I too support it with all my energy. Thank you.
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to add, because it's also been brought up that these are racially charged items, that a poll that was conducted just this month for Rasmussen stated that white voters approve of voter identification with 74%, black voters at 69%, and non-white voters at 82%, 75% of Americans supporting voter ID laws. These are pretty common across the country, and they certainly don't indicate that anyone is more capable or less capable of obtaining a free state identification. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator from Wyandotte, Senator Petty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A poll was just mentioned, and I will say that 67% of Americans support H.R. 1, according to a January 2021 poll, including 56% of Republicans and 68% of independents. So there is overwhelming bipartisan support for H.R. 1, and I think that's important for us to be aware of. I do have a few questions for the Senator for Saline, if he'll stand for them.
He's standing.
Does the carrier oppose paperless electronic voting machines to be replaced with machines that provide an individual paper record of each vote?
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do not oppose having those machines replaced. However, I do oppose many portions of H.R. 1 and S1. I think we've been over this multiple times, that there are some specific items that are stated in House Concurrent Resolution 5015 that are found objectionable, and that there are certainly other provisions. The ACLU has indicated its objection to H.R. 1 and S1, stating that it should be voted against, even though they do support portions of it. So again, I would just state that it is possible to have some support of some pieces of a legislation, but that other parts are so objectionable that it should be voted against. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator from Wyandotte, Senator Petty.
Well, I appreciate that comment from the Senator from Saline. I think that does even more reinforce why such a resolution is so unnecessary. And back to the paperless voting. In Kansas, we currently, according to the Secretary of State, we have multiple counties in Kansas that use paperless electronic voting systems, and a paper ballot record is also critical for recounts of close elections. And this legislation would allow for grants to help those counties that do not currently have paperless machines, or to have a paper record, to receive funds to help with that. Even though the carrier may not appreciate the questions, I think it is important that it helps our body to understand that this piece of legislation covers so many parts of the voting opportunities across the country that it's important to be aware of what is in the bill. Does the carrier oppose the requirement that all voting machines in federal elections should be manufactured in the United States?
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I do appreciate questions. I apologize if it was inferred that I do not. This question's already been asked, and it was answered the same way the other questions have been, and they'll continue to be, and that is that House Concurrent Resolution number 5015 doesn't contemplate that item is objectionable, and that instead, as the ACLU has indicated, that this bill should be voted against because of even one objectionable element that it finds infringes upon the First Amendment rights to free speech.
Senator from Wyandotte, Senator Petty.
Well, I'll continue to ask the questions, and I'll continue to provide the information if the Senator for Saline wants to answer them in different ways. It is important that the machines be made in the United States, and that the vendors ensure the security and accuracy of their systems. Does the carrier oppose election system vendors being required to report a suspected cybersecurity breach to election officials?
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As the ACLU has indicated in their letter to Congress, it is possible to have these items brought as separate bills. Unfortunately, these were not brought as separate bills. Instead, they were all lumped into one partisan bill that passed on a party line vote. It is certainly possible to address each one of these issues in separate legislation without the objectionable material that exists and is spoken about specifically in House Concurrent Resolution 5015. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator from Wyandotte, Senator Petty.
So this legislation, it's been, I heard reference not just from the carrier of the bill, but from others about fraud that occurred in our elections across the country this year, although I would say that there was reference to the fact that it didn't happen in Kansas. And the interesting thing that I think of around 54 cases that were brought forward concerning fraud in any of the states across the country, none of them actually went to court and none of them went to trial because there was no substantial evidence. So it's easy to throw out the word fraud without having any basis for it. It was mentioned that this piece of legislation is not bipartisan, but yet voters of all political stripes should have confidence that their right to vote will not be threatened by error-prone and discriminatory registration systems and practices, and that voters do support modernization of voter registration to make it more accurate. It is one of the most important steps we can take to secure our elections by ensuring that voters' information is up to date. H.R. 1 includes several provisions to secure our elections and protect the voters' rights of all Americans, Republicans and Democrats. These provisions are drawn from well-established practices in both red and blue states and reflect bipartisan congressional legislation. H.R. 1 provides for automatic voter registration, AVR, where eligible citizens would be automatically registered to vote when they interact with government agencies like the DMV. Voters would retain the option to opt out of registration if they desire. The AVR through the DMV has been successful. It's been adopted and implemented in 16 states, including red and purple states like West Virginia, Alaska, and Georgia, often with bipartisan support. So we have measures across the country, some of which we have in place in Kansas, that have been successful. And it is concerning for me as a Kansan who has worked here in the Senate, in the Kansas Senate, to see some improvements occur, and then because of political division, for people to decide that they want to change election laws, whether it be in Kansas or across the country, to conform with some sort of notion that they are restricting voters' rights, when this last election proved that the more people that go to the polls, the more voices we have being heard, which is, I think, what we want to have going on in governments in Kansas and across the country. This legislation allows for that. We should keep that in mind as we, in the future, might be looking at some bills that are coming forth here that are going to restrict some of those doors that we have opened to voters, like with advanced voting and the arrival of those ballots. This is a good piece of legislation. It's unfortunate that we want to take a position in opposition to tell Congress to do something that really is not in the best interest of Kansas.
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays, would you like to respond?
I'll save for my close, thank you.
Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. The senator from Saline referred to, in one of his answers, the vagueness of the wording. My concern in many ways with this concurrent resolution is the vagueness of the resolution, that it's overly broad, that it nowhere affirms that many of the provisions in H.R. 1 and S1 are appropriate. I'm particularly concerned that the resolution is, be it resolved by the House of Representatives of the state of Kansas, the Senate concurring therein, that each state legislature should have the freedom and flexibility to determine practices that best meet the needs of their respective states, and the authority to legislate changes to the election process should be left to the states. I think much of the ideas that were part of the concurrent resolution, H.R. 1 and S1, reflect good practice that the nation should follow, especially in our presidential elections. And I think that we should support Congress in working through those concerns, we should perhaps send a note to our 2 senators about specific concerns that we have, even if it says, you know, we want you to vote against S1 because of these particular concerns. But this resolution as written implies that there is not a good foundation to address voter concerns. I believe that we had that and that this body should vote down House Concurrent Resolution number 5015.
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll save for my close.
Senator from Leavenworth, Senator Pittman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I see this resolution. I'm not sure exactly why we're doing it, but I understand that there are some in our midst who feel this is to be the most important thing they're working on, so I get it. And I go through this and I look at the different pieces of this. And I think, you know, there's a lot of this that I see as a reaction to our last election where there was calls that said that the last election was ripe with fraud. And I can recall our Attorney General filing a couple of lawsuits in that regard. Federal lawsuits, mind you. Federal lawsuits, not here in the state of Kansas, where our Secretary of State, our Republican Secretary of State, had said that we have really great results in terms of our election security. Federal laws we went up against to say that our rights in the state of Kansas were jeopardized at the federal level because of other states' election laws. And suit after suit, I recall being filed, and yet they were unsuccessful. These resolutions, these House bills, the Senate one, they are trying to put a framework in place that we as states, as counties, can adhere to so that we have our interests here in Kansas protected at the federal level when we're doing these federal elections. And that's important to me. I think solutions are better than resolutions that have no meaning, no teeth. We should be working with the folks if we have issues with these individual line items inside of these bills, rather than sitting here and saying reject the whole thing. It doesn't make sense to me. Why not work with them and say, look, if we do agree with the ACLU, let's back these changes up and make those changes. Let's work with the folks in Congress and come up with solutions. People don't like seeing that we have gerrymandered elections across the United States. They don't like seeing the fact that we have gerrymandered districts. They look at them and they say, how in the world, Senator Pittman, did you get a district that looks like that? And I say, well, that's the way it goes. You know, if you're in power, you get to make a few more rules than other people. And this bill calls for independent commissions to come in and look at the population censuses and say, hey, look, these look like fair districts. That seems like a pretty good idea to me. Maybe it needs to be tweaked, but that seems good, and we call that out in this resolution. And then we look at transparency. We look at transparency and public accountability. We look down here and it says that we are limiting the First Amendment rights, and I can only be reminded of Citizens United in that ruling by the Supreme Court that gives our corporations that freedom of speech through their money to these dark money PACs. And I look at this and I say, well, are we really taking away our people's freedom of speech with this? Our people's First Amendment rights? Or are we taking away corporations' First Amendment rights and their ability to donate to dark money PACs and influence our elections across this land? There are pieces of these bills in Congress that I don't like. There are pieces that I don't like as well. And I hope to work with our members in Congress to fix those things I don't like. But this resolution seems out of place. I think that the intent and the action was to make our democratic country, based on these very things, our voting rights, to protect those voting rights, to make it a place where even those who struggle and work day to day, 9-to-5 jobs and have a hard time getting to the polls, even they get to have a voice. And so I stand opposed to this House concurrent resolution if you hadn't already figured that out. Thank you, sir.
Seeing no further questions for the carry of the bill, the chair recognizes the senator from Wyandotte, Senator Haley.
Well, since you don't want any more questions on it, I did have one brief one, Mr. Chair, a brief question, but also then kind of a codification of what we've heard. The only question that I have is for the carriers, why this came directly to the Committee of the Whole and why it didn't come through the committee process as it did in the House.
Senator from Saline, Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's not a question I can answer.
Senator from Wyandotte, Senator Haley.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank the Senator from Saline. I think that some of the questions that have come up now or some of the statements that have been made now might have been perhaps better vetted had we gone through the traditional process that we go through everything. It's very rare, as many of us know, that a bill comes directly to the Committee of the Whole. Had it come to, I guess this would have been Federal and State Affairs, Mr. Chair, or if it had been vetted, we probably wouldn't be spending as much time as we have today to try and get some of the answers to the questions that we have. I certainly, my point that I really wanted to make was not that we didn't have a chance to discuss this or to have the proponents or opponents come to a Senate committee and vet it, but to the overall process itself, it does bear repeating that when we go through these exercises, and my big concern is that we as Kansans put ourselves in the position of being fodder for national, I guess we look at a level of almost near buffoonery when we do things like this and send them to the Congress. You know, we've gotten into taking resolutions like this and not pumping the brakes on them to have them better vetted and concerned. And it's going to reach the point where if something comes out of the Kansas legislature and it's addressed to DC, to our members of Congress or the president or to whomever it goes, they'll say, oh, this is another one of those deals coming out of Kansas. They're just, you know, it's Kansas. And we won't be taken as seriously as I would hope a great state that this great state would be. And that's my only concern. That's a big concern. I'm not suggesting that there aren't some good questions raised by this House concurrent resolution. Not at all. I'm suggesting that we should go through the process and be more deliberate. You might recall, Mr. Chair, that we went through this exercise a couple years ago in memorializing the state of New York. We didn't like some of their policy, or I'm sorry, some people in this chamber did not like some of their policies regarding the state of New York on abortion, and we fired off, had a great debate, and then fired off to New York a statement that was suggesting to them how their state law should be exercised regarding choice or women's rights to choose their reproductive health. And what fell out from that, I don't know if any of you saw it, was again, it was Kansas spouting off with no jurisdiction to speak on an issue that would have no impact whatsoever. The good people in New York said, thank you, we'll handle our business. And I think the Congress are going to say, when this resolution passes and it goes to the Congress, the only people who are going to think that it really matters, there'll be probably 3 members of Congress from Kansas and 2 U.S. senators who say, thank you so much for supporting this, Mr. Chair. To the rest of the country, they're going to say, there goes Kansas again. There they go. And I just don't want there to be a continuing potential disregard because we take all this time with unvetted legislation, go through this exercise and whatever it is, to take time and energy when viable issues are lying on the table and sitting on these orange sheets on our desks in these final days of the regular session that should be discussed. So I just hope that we're more deliberate as more things come up next year or maybe even later this year. When you fire off a resolution to non-responding or couldn't care less parties like our Congress. And I just wanted to make that point. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Seeing no further questions, Senator from Saline, Senator Clays, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to leave you with a few thoughts on HCR 5015 and the two bills that it urges Congress to reject. This from the ACLU, H.R. 1 would too greatly impinge upon the freedoms of speech and association, and we cannot support those provisions or allow a vote without voicing opposition to them. For those reasons, the ACLU opposes H.R. 1 and urges a no vote on passage of the bill. Paraphrasing, I moved a few words around there, sorry. It also allows for public funding of campaigns. It will use public funds to create a 6-to-1 match on political contributions, forcing the American people to spend millions of dollars to fund the campaigns of political candidates. Candidates that can then take a salary out of their campaigns and be able to be paid with public funds provided by that 6-to-1 match program. This bill, and it was said earlier that this was bipartisan in some way. It was actually passed on a party line vote. It was 100% partisan. But you know what was bipartisan? Voter identification laws in the state of Kansas. They were passed with a bipartisan vote that included the vote of the current governor. These laws are basic protections to the integrity of an election. And when an election has integrity, people participate. When people question the integrity of an election, they do not. States have developed the knowledge, procedures, and infrastructure to adapt and respond to preferences for how residents in their respective states want to vote. Each state has their own unique laws and processes for conducting an election. H.R. 1 and S1 reject that tradition and impose a one-size-fits-all mandate on states by federalizing election administration. It diminishes the expertise and knowledge of elections officials and places an even greater burden on them by imposing changes to elections administration, destroying cherished, long-held election practices of the Kansas electorate. It does not reflect the values of Kansas voters. HCR 5015 simply encourages Congress to respect local control, and it urges rejection of HR 1 and S1. And with that, I move that when the committee rises and reports, it reports HCR 5015 favorably for adoption.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. We will now turn our attention to House Bill 2165. The chair recognizes the senator from Sedgwick, Senator Peterson, to explain the bill and to adopt the committee report.
I move we adopt the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Ayes have it. Motion carried.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2165 is known as the antique car bill. What it basically does, it allows these older vehicles, 35 years and older, to have non-original parts placed on them. They do not have to have the same type of part on them. They can have regular tires instead of bias-ply tires. They can have chrome wheels instead of the original wheels. It allows people that had vehicles with wooden wheels, if they wanted to put steel wheels on them so they can take them out and enjoy them or drive them in parades, allows them the ability to do that. It also came over to us from the House, removing the street rod vehicles. Now, street rod vehicles, a lot of those are vehicles that people have built completely from the ground up out of parts. They're very proud of them. They pay more than the antique fee on their license plate. And the House removed them from this, and it would be no longer necessary to have them. We've heard that there's actually more 32 Fords running around right now than General Motors, or than Ford actually invented, or that built, manufactured. I'll get the right term there in a minute. Also, the bill, so the Senate decided, our committee decided to remove this. We heard from several street rodders from the deals from their emails, and we heard from a House member from Transportation said there was some confusion when they took this off. There was a very high physical note, 1.9 million to the State Highway Fund. We also heard that just the people, because there's 68,000 potential vehicles that could be registered, that they think may go over. Some of those may not go over though, because if they're a pickup truck in the antique vehicle, you can only carry 500 pounds. A lot of people still want to use their old trucks for that, for hauling stuff. So with that, I'd stand for questions.
Are there questions for the senator from Sedgwick? Senator from Wyandotte, Senator Petty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would the senator from Sedgwick stand for a question?
He's standing.
Senator, how often does this have to be renewed?
Senator from Sedgwick, Senator Peterson.
You renew your tax, you pay the $40 fee one time, and then it's $5 every year to be renewal. Street rods are renewed every year. It's $26 on them.
Senator from Wyandotte, Senator Petty.
Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, Senator, you may close.
I move when the committee rise and report, House Bill 2165, favorable for passage.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Motion carries. We will now turn our attention to Senate Bill 290. The chair recognizes Senator from Lyons, Senator Longbine, to explain the...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 290 amends the law which governs the Healthcare Stabilization Fund. The fund is a medical malpractice insurance arrangement that has been in place since 1976, or about 45 years. The bill was introduced at the request of the Kansas Medical Society. This mechanism provides medical malpractice insurance coverage for physicians, hospitals, and several other categories of healthcare providers. It is a unique public-private insurance arrangement that is state-operated but privately capitalized and funded. When a doctor or a hospital is sued for negligence in a medical malpractice action, any judgment or settlement in the case is paid to the claimant by the insurance mechanism. The Healthcare Stabilization Fund serves two very important purposes. Number one is it ensures that there's a source of recovery for patients who are injured as a result of medical malpractice. And just as important, it provides a mechanism to make sure adequate liability insurance is available to healthcare providers. In committee, we had testimony that the fund was established in 1976 due to the fact that Kansas was in a crisis and Kansas physicians could not obtain the liability coverage that they needed. And if they could obtain it, it was very, very expensive. So this mechanism was born at that time and has served the state of Kansas very, very well for 45 years. The bill makes two major changes. It increases the amount of liability insurance coverage that healthcare providers covered by the fund must maintain to $1 million per claim, subject to an annual aggregate of $3 million. The bill does this by requiring the healthcare provider's private insurance and the Healthcare Stabilization Fund to each provide insurance coverage of $500,000 per claim. It's also noted that 90% of the healthcare groups covered by the Healthcare Stabilization Fund already have $1 million or more, and 99% of Kansas physicians already carry $1 million or more. The second major thing that the bill does is the bill allows the fund to offer higher limits of excess coverage than it was able to do before today. One of the driving forces for the establishment of the Healthcare Stabilization Fund in 1976 was the inability of physicians and hospitals to obtain adequate coverage. In addition to the two changes, the bill also makes several technical updates which are non-controversial, including allowing the medical society the flexibility to nominate a non-physician representative for one of its 3 positions on the board, increasing the current limitation on installment payments the fund makes in the case of judgments or settlements, allowing healthcare facilities that qualify as a self-insurer through the licensed captive insurer to opt out of selecting of the fund coverage limits, so as long as the facilities are in substantial compliance with the Act, and it increases the service notice requirement from 10 days to 30 days that a plaintiff intends to file. There were multiple proponents to the bill and no opponents. With that, I'll stand for question.
Are there questions for the senator from Lyon? Senator from Leavenworth, Senator Pittman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to speak in support of this bill. This fund, this Healthcare Stabilization Fund, is a great thing for Kansas. It helps normalize for all of our healthcare providers, our doctors, the insurance or the coverage when they are subject to potential lawsuits for negligence and those unfortunate things. And this update, this is fantastic for our constituents who might be find themselves having to get compensation through this fund. So I am strong support of it. It's good for Kansans and it's good for our medical providers here.
Senator from Lyon, Senator Longbine, would you like to respond? Senator from McPherson, Senator Wilborn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to support this bill, show support for this bill. The good senator from Lyon did an excellent job of explaining it. But let me tell you some things, rumors I've been hearing. Number one, this is not a government-funded program whatsoever. It's funded by fees from the doctors, and doctors' fees go to the fund to support the medical malpractice program. I personally was chair of the Healthcare Stabilization Plan for 15 years, and that's the doctor's JUA, or the medical malpractice side of that plan. In part, it was driven by the fact that the Miller-Johnson medical malpractice decision made by the Supreme Court, removing the caps on non-economic damages, helped drive the need for higher limits. Number two, a doctor buys this because it's the law, first of all in Kansas, automobile insurance, workers' compensation, and medical mal are required to have insurance coverage. Number two is to protect the doctor's assets. And with over 20 years at the same limits with inflation, and with the Supreme Court removing the medical mal caps and the threat thereof, it is high time that they move forward. And again, I want to emphasize this is a privately funded, administered by a government agency, but privately funded and is not anything out of the SGF. Thank you.
Senator from Lyon, Senator Longbine, would you like to respond?
I would just like to thank both good senators for speaking in favor of the bill.
Senator from Reno, Senator Stephan.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to take a little deeper dive into this. So for my edification, if for nothing else, I'd like to ask a couple of questions of the senator from Lyon, if possible.
You may proceed.
Okay. Let me preface it with, again, as I said earlier, by the grace of God, I've done nothing but pay premiums and never had to use it. So I'm very happy to report that. For years and years through the stabilization fund, we've had a $200,000, $600,000 first money coverage, and now we're suddenly bumping that up 250% to $500,000 and $1.5 million. One of the things I think that's incredibly important for folks to understand and for me to articulate is that over the course of the last 20, 25 years, I've literally seen no increase in my premiums. You know, it's two components. So you have the Healthcare Stabilization Fund for $200,000 to $600,000, which is X number of dollars. Plus you have a supplemental policy that bumps the total up to $1 million, $3 million. And while I've gone through multiple insurance companies on the high-end side, again, my premiums literally have not budged for 25 years. So I really, really would like to understand what the need for the change is. Because the other thing I don't see anywhere in the bill or the supplemental note is what will happen to my premiums through the stabilization fund as I'm forced to pay for a higher coverage policy. Do we have those premiums? Do we have an explanation of why this change is necessary?
Senator from Lyon, Senator Longbine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I understand it, the board of the Healthcare Stabilization Fund, which is made up mainly of healthcare providers, felt like this was warranted, especially since the limits hadn't been changed since 1976. They didn't feel like it was going to be a financial burden or a huge increase in premiums to anybody because, as I said earlier, 99% of the physicians in the state already carry $1 million or more, and 90% of the healthcare providers that are covered by the Healthcare Stabilization Fund have at least $1 million or more.
Senator from Reno, Senator Stephan.
Thank you. Now, from the data contained within the supplemental note, it's clear that in fiscal year 2020, that the average payout per claim settled was $54,000. So that clearly isn't anywhere near these new limits. Again, I don't understand and would like more clarification as to why we have this 250% bump up with no clarification of what these new rates are going to be. Could we shed any light on that?
Senator from Lyon, Senator Longbine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I previously said, that's what the Healthcare Stabilization Board arrived at. I think it was negotiated with a number of members of the insureds that, such as, a number of healthcare providers. And so, I think it's important to remember that while the average claim may have only been $54,000, nobody buys insurance for to insure the first $100. They always buy insurance for the big event that may happen. And so, I think also the $1 million limit helps with the excess lines to get greater capacity and greater rates on the excess line if the physicians are taking the first $1 million along with the Healthcare Stabilization Fund.
Senator from Reno, Senator Stephan.
If the good senator would indulge me in another question. I see in here that there's a opt-out for specific entities if they so desire. Can you explain that to me? If the more people we're covering, the better our rates can be. Who is able to opt out, and how does that benefit the fund?
Senator from Lyon, Senator Longbine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I understand it, the bill would allow healthcare facilities that qualify as a self-insurer through a licensed captive insurer to opt out of selecting one of the fund coverage limits, so long as the facilities are in substantial compliance with the Act.
Senator from Reno, Senator Stephan.
Is that beneficial to the stability of the fund?
Senator from Lyon, Senator Longbine.
I don't have any way of answering that, but I assume that since this bill was brought by KMS on behalf of the Healthcare Stabilization Fund, their board doesn't have much concern over it.
Senator from Reno, Senator Stephan.
There seems to be a change in the tail coverage that from reading it, I don't understand. Can you help me understand that, please?
Senator from Lyon, Senator Longbine.
Could the senator from Reno ask the question again? I didn't really understand what he was referring to.
Senator from Reno, Senator Stephan. Within
the bill, they address tail coverage, which is very, very important to a malpractice policy. And it's changed, and it's not clear to me what this change is. I was hoping to get clarification.
Senator from Lyon, Senator Longbine.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not aware of any change in tail coverage. Could the senator from Reno tell us exactly what it's saying?
Senator from Reno, Senator Stephan.
I'm looking at the supplemental note where it says inactive health care provider tail coverage. It says the bill would delete a subsection that expired on July 1st, 2014, limiting HCSF liability for inactive health care providers to those health care providers in compliance with HCSF requirements for not less than 5 years of those who remedy noncompliance is provided in statute.
Senator from Lyon, Senator Longbine.
I think what the senator from Reno is looking at is the tail coverage requires 3 times the minimum, which has always been 3 times the minimum, and so with the increase in the minimum, then there would be an increase in the tail.
Senator from Reno, Senator Stephan.
Very good. I appreciate the good senator's time and efforts. There's a lot of holes in this. It's not clear as why this is needed. It's not clear as to what the ramifications on premiums will be. And as such, I'm going to be voting no on this bill. Thank you.
Senator from Lyons, Senator Longbine. Senator from McPherson, Senator Wilborn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to answer a couple of questions, having a little background in this. The premiums are developed through loss cost and specialty. For example, a neurosurgeon comes with a higher rate than a general family practitioner. Couple that with their loss cost, have they had losses over the years, and that mixture is how they come up with exposure times the premium and the eventual premium. Number two, we talked about their average loss being $53,000. That's probably accurate. I don't want to argue with that. But when I was chairman of the Healthcare Stabilization Fund, we won 80%. We got a defense verdict on 80% of the cases at a defense cost of $65,000 a case. So there's more than just the verdict. There's defense costs built into these premiums. So I just want to kind of address some of that. As far as the tail coverage is critical for doctors who retire. It's just a matter of way of protecting their assets and providing a income, or not income, but a stream for the individuals that may have been harmed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Seeing no further questions, Senator, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the committee's or the body's indulgence today on Senate Bill 290. I have been told that there will be no premium increase due to the changes in this bill, and so as we move forward on this, I would appreciate the support of the body. I move that when the committee rises and it reports Senate Bill 290 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The motion is carried. We will now turn our attention to Senate Bill 2203. The chair recognizes the senator from Sedgwick County, Senator Kirshen, to explain the bill and to adopt the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move we adopt the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. That motion is carried. Senator, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What we're dealing with today is that we have an asbestos control program, and what House Bill 2203 does is create an asbestos remediation fund where all the money that is collected will end up in that fund instead of go into the control program. Where the money did come before is from some SGF, and then if they needed extra money, they would take some from the Clean Air Act, and that would end up in the asbestos control program. But under the fund, that will no longer happen, and they will just strictly use those monies for what they were intended for. You probably recognize this bill. It was Senate Bill 261, passed across this floor about a month ago. There were no opponents, and so now we have the House's version 2203, and we'll stand for questions.
Are there questions for the senator from Sedgwick? Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have a question, but I do stand in support. This is the same as Senate Bill 261 that the Senate as a whole amended, and the committee is presenting the bill in the form as the Senate amended it. I thank the chair, the vice chair, and the members of the committee for their work on this.
Seeing no questions, Senator, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do want to thank the senator from Douglas. It was her amendment that fixed it for us. So with that, I move that when the committee rise and report House Bill 2203 favorable for passage.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. That motion is carried. We will now turn our attention to House Bill 2134. The chair recognizes the senator from Lyons, Senator Longbine, to explain the bill and to adopt the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move we adopt the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. That motion is carried. Senator, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2134 will be very, very familiar to the body. It deals with the NAIC credit for reinsurance model regulation. It amends the Kansas credit for reinsurance statute, and it adds another condition under which a ceding insurer is permitted for insurance The bill would also amend the Insurance Holding Company Act by adding definitions for group-wide supervisor and internationally active insurance group, requiring the filing with the Commissioner of Insurance of a confidential notice of proposed divestiture by a controlling person of a domestic insurer, and the pre-acquisition notice by the acquiring person, and adding amendments or modifications to the affiliate agreements of those transactions. This bill is exactly the same bill as Senate Bill 28. The only difference is the enactment date. Senate Bill 28 passed our body on February the 1st, 39-0. With that, I would stand for questions.
Are there questions for the senator from Lyon? Seeing none, Senator, you may close.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee rises to report, it reports House Bill 2134 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Motion's carried. We will now turn our attention to Senate Bill 181. The chair recognizes the senator from Cali, Senator Alley, to explain the bill and to adopt the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I adopt the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Motion's carried. Senator, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The main purpose of Senate Bill 181, which is the Elevator Safety Act, is to ensure that there's a statewide standard for maintenance and inspection of elevators. We want to ensure everybody who installs, maintains, and inspects in proper training, that they have proper training and education. Kansas is one of only 2 states that has not adopted a statewide safety code for elevators and escalators. Kansas has no requirement for inspection of commercial elevators and escalators, and Kansas has no requirement that people who install, maintain, and repair the elevators are trained or licensed. We require, this bill would require commercial elevators and escalators to have an annual inspection. I went and pulled the inspection reports for the elevators in this building and found I could not find them for about 3 or 4 days. And they were behind about a couple years. So that's one reason for this. And it also requires people who install, maintain, and repair elevators have proper training and education and be licensed. And it leaves specifications for the implementation and enforcement to the State Fire Marshal and Advisory Board in the development of the regulations. But what is not in this bill is single-family dwellings, grain elevators, wind turbine towers, and cabinets that move materials. And so with that, I will stand for questions.
Are there questions from the Senate for the senator from Cali? Senator from Sedgwick, Senator Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to rise in support of this bill. I appreciate the way the chair had the proponents get together with some of the neutrals and work it out so that our counties that have elevator inspection programs that meet this requirement or exceed it can continue on with their own programs, leaving local control in place. Also, I appreciate the fact that it doesn't grow government because it allows the contract inspectors to help with the inspections. Thank you.
Senator from Cali, would you like to respond?
No, not at this time.
Senator from Leavenworth, Senator Pittman.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to take this opportunity to indulge, and I say I cannot wait until our cage elevator is up and operating again. It's well ventilated. I love that elevator. It's of historic purposes, built in 1923, and I cannot wait till that comes through, and I do support this bill.
Seeing no further questions. Oops, I do see one. Senator from Lyon, Senator Longbine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to speak in favor of this bill. I had some pretty big concerns with it when it first came out, and Chairman Alley did a great job of working through this bill and removing some of the things that I had concerns about, such as the chain hoist in my shop and whether we needed to have that inspected as an elevator. So I think the changes that were made were very good. I think it does protect the public on those elevators that carry passengers, not equipment, and so I strongly urge the body to support.
Senator from Cali, Senator Alley, would you like to respond?
No, thank you.
Senator from Sedgwick, Senator Foscato.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too rise in support of Senate Bill 181. I believe the measure in there to address Wichita-Sedgwick County was addressed, so I urge the body support. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Seeing no further questions, Senator, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, but I do have an amendment, and that amendment is S1993.
Have you turned it in?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Give us a second to get it handed out. Senator from Cali, would you like to have your amendment read, or would you like to explain it?
I can explain it, thank you. This amendment can be found on page 10, following line 12. This section shall not apply to any elevator located in a city or county that has adopted regulations or requirements or standards that meet or exceed the requirements or standards of this act and any rules and regulations adopted pursuant thereto. This was put in because some of our towns and cities have regulations, and they do more than just, they go higher than what this bill does. And so this is for like Wichita, Kansas City, Topeka, that have their own elevator inspections. So with that, I move my amendment.
Are there any questions on this amendment before Senator moves it? Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question for the senator from Cali would simply be that this goes along with the other changes that were made by the Senate committee to refer to any city or county that has adopted requirements and standards that meet or exceed the requirements. And I thank the committee for addressing this, not only throughout the bill, but also in this final amendment.
Thank you.
Seeing no further questions on the amendment, Senator, you may move your amendment.
Mr. Chair, I move my amendment.
All those in favor, say aye. All those opposed, no. That motion is carried. We are now back on the bill. Are there any questions for the senator from Cali, Senator Alley, on the bill? Seeing none, Senator, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that when the committee rises and reports, it reports Senate Bill 181 as amended favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. That motion is carried. We will now turn our attention to House Bill 2167. The chair recognizes the senator from Sedgwick, Senator Peterson, to explain the bill and to adopt the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move we adopt the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. That motion's carried. Senator, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill allows concrete mixer trucks to display their license plate on the front or the back so they don't continue to get damaged. Requires aggregate and dump trucks to display them on the front, and exempts farm vehicles. With that, I'll stand for questions.
Are there questions for Senator from Sedgwick? Seeing none, Senator, you may close.
Moving to committee rise and report House Bill 2167 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. That motion is carried. We will now turn our attention to House Bill 2218. The chair recognizes the senator from Sedgwick, Senator McGinn, to explain the bill and to adopt the committee report.
I move adoption of the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. That motion is carried. Senator, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. House Bill 2218, as amended, has to do with the governing of the implementation of the administration of the health care benefits state employee plan, and it adds language regarding the role of the State Employees Health Care Commission program as to membership. Section 1 of the bill has the current language, and it also adds some language that has to do with balancing the healthcare needs of state employees at affordable cost. Section 2 of the bill, it increases the healthcare commission from 5 to 7. The 2 that we would add would be someone from the Senate Budget Committee and someone from the House Appropriations Committee. They would be appointed appropriately from the President and the Speaker's office. Also on this commission, not more than 5 will be of one party. And then the chair currently is the Secretary of Administration. And what this bill would also do is alternate that. The chair would be the Department of Administration in even years and the Secretary of Insurance in odd years. And then finally, it adds a report on the current and projected balances over 10% of the expected expense for the following years. And that report would be, they would be required of anything over 10% to look at ideas and possible ways to lower the expense of health care to our employees. The base part of this bill had to do with changing from, you had to be all classified at the time when this bill started back in the 1980s. And since the classified and unclassified percentages of employees has changed over the years, the Department of Administration would like to be able to open that pool up a little bit. So it's anybody that has a state insurance policy that would be eligible to be appointed to this commission. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Are there questions for the senator from Sedgwick? Senator from Leavenworth, Senator Pittman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This bill, I have concerns for our state employees paying so much for their portion of insurance costs. And I guess I'd like to ask the good senator a couple of questions about that.
You may proceed.
Thank you. Does this address in some fashion or form the net cost or the resultant cost of what our state employees are going to be paying for insurance? Does it actually affect them in some fashion or form?
Senator from Sedgwick, Senator McGinn.
Yes, so what this commission does, they provide a report to the President and the Speaker about the health care costs moving forward. And the amendments that were added to this bill will actually help in this process by also adding the over 10% that they have to figure out how to lower the cost to employees' health care plans.
Senator from Leavenworth, Senator Pittman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And then when we added the 2 members of the legislature as well as alternating the commissioner versus having the governor appoint the Secretary of Administration, was there something about those spots that are going to help lower the cost for the state employees?
Senator from Sedgwick, Senator McGinn.
I believe they will. If you look at the current 5 that's on there, it's the insurance commissioner, the Secretary of Administration, a current state employee, and this is where we expanded to where it can be an unclassified employee. Also, anyone that's retired that is currently still has a state health care plan. And what this does, it actually adds someone from the budget in both the House and the Senate to take a look at this. If you look at the current 5, you don't have anybody on there that's asking the questions about Marathon Health Clinic, Health Quest, or any of those other programs that we provide within our insurance.
Senator from Leavenworth, Senator Pittman.
Thank you.
Senator from Johnson, Senator...
It's Sykes.
Senator Sykes.
Thank you. Just have a couple of questions. I appreciate the underlining bill and just a couple of concerns. I'm curious as why this didn't go to the insurance committee to discuss some of these provisions instead of Ways and Means.
Senator from Sedgwick, Senator McGinn.
I certainly don't make those decisions as to which committee bills go to, but I will share that in the Budget Committee, there is a number of times that Health Quest and the fact that we even allowed the Marathon Health Clinic to be opened a few years ago, all those decisions were made in the Budget Committee.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Sykes.
Thank you for that explanation. And it may be fine. I just do have a couple, I've had several people question some of the amendments that were added on in Ways and Means on the Senate side. So just a caution on that, and maybe knowing this will go to conference, just hopefully we can have that a broader discussion on that in conference. Thank you.
Senator, seeing no further questions, you may close.
Thank you. I move that when the committee rises in a report, it reports House Bill 2218 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The motion is carried. The chair recognizes the Assistant Majority Leader from Cali, Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the committee rise and report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. That motion is carried.
I knew you guys were going to make such quick work of that, we would have put a few more on the list, right? Clerk will read the committee report.
On motion of Senator Alley, the Senate resolved itself into the Committee of the Whole for consideration of bills on the calendar under the heading of General Orders with Senator Hildebrand in the chair. Recommended HCR 5015 be adopted, Senate Bill 290 be passed, HB 2165, HB 2203, HB 2134, HB 2167, HB 2218 be amended by the adoption of the committee report and the bills be passed as amended. Senate Bill 181 be amended by the adoption of the committee report, be further amended on motion of Senator Alley, and the bill be passed as further amended.
Chair recognizes the Senator from Cherokee.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to adopt the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Report's adopted. We'll start reading some, I think, reports of standing committees, but then we'll probably stand at ease for a little bit. There's a few more coming in. Reports of standing committees, clerk will read.
Mr. President, the Committee on Commerce recommends HB 2196 be amended by substituting a new bill to be designated as Senate substitute for substitute House Bill number 2196, and the substitute bill be passed. Senator Olson, chairperson. Mr. President, the Committee on Judiciary recommends Senate Bill 304 be passed. Senator Warren, chairperson. Mr. President, the Committee on Ways and Means recommends HB 2021 as amended by House Committee of the Whole be amended and the bill be passed as amended. Senator Billinger, chairperson. Mr. President, your Committee on Ways and Means begs leave to submit the following report. The following appointment was referred to and considered by the committee, and your committee recommends that the Senate approve and consent to such appointment by the governor, member Kansas Development Finance Authority, Shakita Padmanabhan, Senator Billinger, chairperson. Mr. President, the Committee on Transparency and Ethics recommends House Bill 2090 as amended by House Committee be amended and the bill be passed as amended. Senator Bowers, chairperson. Mr. President, the Committee on Transparency and Ethics recommends House Bill 2390 be amended and the bill be passed as amended. Senator Bowers, chairperson. Mr. President, the Committee on Transparency and Ethics recommends House Bill 2096 be passed. Senator Bowers, chairperson. Mr. President, the Committee on Ways and Means recommends substitute for House Bill 2094 be passed. Senator Billinger, chairperson. Mr. President, the Committee on Ways and Means recommends House Bill 2248 be amended and the bill be passed as amended. Senator Billinger, chairperson. Mr. President, your Committee on Commerce begs leave to submit the following report. The following appointment was referred to and considered by the committee, and your committee recommends that the Senate approve and consent to such appointment by the Governor. Secretary, Kansas Department of Labor, Amber Schultz, to serve at the pleasure of the Governor. Senator Olson, chairperson. Mr. President, the Committee on Federal and State Affairs recommends HB 2332 as amended by House Committee be amended and the bill be passed as amended. Senator Olson, chairperson. Mr. President, the Committee on Public Health and Welfare recommends Senate Bill 212 be amended and the bill be passed as amended. Senator Hildebrand, chairperson. Mr. President, the Committee on Assessment and Taxation recommends Senate Bill 263 be amended and the bill be passed as amended. Senator Tyson, chairperson. Mr. President, the Committee on Assessment and Taxation recommends House Bill 2106 be amended and the bill be passed as amended. Senator Bowers, chairperson. Mr. President, the Committee on Transparency and Ethics recommends House Bill 2391 as amended by House Committee be amended and the bill be passed as amended. Senator Bowers, chairperson. Mr. President, the Committee on Public Health and Welfare recommends HB 2209 as amended by House Committee be amended and the bill be passed as amended. Senator Hildebrand, chairperson. Mr. President, the Committee on Public Health and Welfare recommends House Bill 2151 be amended and the bill be passed as amended. Senator Hildebrand, chairperson.
Are there announcements? Senator from Cherokee, Senator Hildebrand.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today was the last day for Public Health and Welfare Committee. So if you were planning, if you're on that committee and you were planning on being here tomorrow for a committee meeting, I hate to tell you, we're not having it. So thank you.
Senator from Sedgwick, Senator Peterson.
Senate Transportation will meet in our normal room at 8:30 tomorrow.
Senator from Lynn, Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Senate Tax Committee will meet tomorrow in our regular room at 9:30 a.m.
Further announcements? Oh, you blended into the poll. Senator from Lyon, Senator Longbine.
I often blend in, I understand. The Senate FI&I Committee will meet tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock in our regular room to finish up work on Senate Bill 288.
Further announcements? Seeing none, Chair recognizes the leader from Cali, Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. President. Fed and State will meet tomorrow morning at 10:30 to finish our work. We have 3 confirmations. And the House or the Senate Republicans will caucus tomorrow and get the time 12:30. We will caucus tomorrow at 12:30 in our regular room, and I yield to the Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Senate Democrats will also caucus at 12:30 tomorrow in our regular room, 287 North.
Senator from Cali, Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate adjourn until 1:30 p.m. on Tuesday, March 30th, 2021.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Senate's adjourned.